The rain fell in a steady drizzle that October afternoon, painting the asphalt in dark, shimmering streaks. Cleo was driving alone down a narrow back road, lined with swaying pines. She was returning from a quiet weekend at her mother's house, needing space from the whirlwind of preparations for her sister Clare's wedding. What she didn't expect was to find a man lying motionless on the roadside, soaked, blood smeared across his face, and eyes tightly shut. Her heart slammed in her chest as she hit the brakes. She leapt from the car. The scene looked like it had been pulled from a nightmare. He was unconscious, his shirt torn and one arm twisted unnaturally. Cleo froze, but only for a moment. Her instincts kicked in. She grabbed a blanket from her trunk, called 911, and dropped to her knees beside him. "Hey, can you hear me?" she whispered, brushing wet hair from his forehead. The man's eyes flickered open, unfocused, as if he were waking from a dream he couldn't quite leave. There was something in his gaze that unsettled her, a strange mixture of pain and softness. "Did you save me?" he mumbled, then slipped under again. At the hospital, Cleo learned he had no ID, no phone, and no memory. The doctors called it trauma-induced amnesia, a temporary fog. Still, something in her wouldn't let go. She visited him every day that week, bringing magazines, books, even homemade soup. She told herself it was compassion. But something deeper stirred. He had no name, no story. So she started imagining one for him, quiet, kind, broken. On the 7th day, he looked at her and said, "I think, my name is Orson." Cleo didn't tell anyone about Orson. Not even Clare. It felt like a secret too fragile to share. A moment suspended in time. An oasis between everything that had hurt before, and everything that was yet to come. When Orson was discharged, she helped him settle into a small apartment above a florist's shop. There was no romance, not yet. But in the long silences, in the quiet glances, something smoldered between them, unsaid and undeniable. On the day of Clare's wedding, Cleo sat among the guests, adjusting her hair as the ceremony began. When the groom turned to take the bride's hands, Cleo felt the ground disappear beneath her feet. It was him, Orson, dressed in a suit, standing beneath an arch of roses, holding her sister's hands. He had a new name now, but his face, his eyes, were the same. And for one long moment, their eyes met. And in that moment, Cleo knew, the man she had rescued, was the same man now vowing forever to her sister. Cleo barely remembered the rest of the ceremony. Her body remained in the pew, still and smiling for the photos, but her mind spun like a storm. Orson, if that was even still his name, never flinched. He stood beside Clare, confident and poised, kissing her knuckles during the vows like a man who'd been in love for years. But Cleo knew better. He had lain bleeding in her arms. He'd asked for her. She had heard his voice, shaky and raw, whisper his name to her like it was a secret being born. So why didn't he react? Why didn't he say anything? Back at the reception, laughter echoed through the decorated barn while Cleo stood frozen near the cake table. Her hands trembled as she wrapped them around a glass of water. Every time she looked across the room and saw Clare in his arms, a new question formed. Was Orson a liar? Had he remembered everything and chosen to deceive her? Or worse, had she been nothing more than a detour on his way to someone else? Her chest tightened as she watched her sister beam with joy, unaware of the crack forming just beneath the surface. At some point, Orson approached her. Alone. Clare had gone off to greet guests. He stopped about 2 feet away, a careful smile tugging at his lips. "Cleo," he said quietly, like they were old friends reuniting. "You look different with your hair down." His tone was casual, but his eyes held something else. Fear? Guilt? Recognition? She couldn't tell. She blinked hard, trying to hold herself together. "You remember me," she said, voice flat. It wasn't a question. It was a dare. A test. And he failed it with silence. "I think you're mistaken," he finally said, almost kindly. "I'm Miles. Miles Carpenter. I've lived in Vermont my whole life." It was rehearsed, polished, like a story repeated too many times. But the tremor in his voice betrayed him. Cleo stepped back. "You don't get to rewrite history just because it's inconvenient," she hissed. "You bled on my passenger seat. You forgot your own name in my arms." For a moment, she saw something crack in his mask. His jaw tightened, and he exhaled as if the weight of her words physically hurt him. But then Clare returned, radiant, clinging to his arm like a woman deeply in love. "There you are," she said, laughing. "I thought I lost my groom." Cleo watched them walk away, hand in hand, his back stiff. As they disappeared into the crowd, Cleo realized something bone deep. Either Orson, Miles, was hiding something far darker than a lost memory, or this was only the beginning of a much bigger betrayal. And for the first time in years, Cleo didn't feel afraid. She felt angry. The next morning, Cleo stood barefoot in her kitchen, staring at a mug of untouched coffee. The events of the night before haunted her like a half-remembered dream. Orson, no, Miles, had looked her in the eye and denied everything. Yet the twitch in his jaw, the hesitation in his voice, none of that matched the confidence he wore around Clare. He was playing a role, and he was good at it. But he hadn't counted calm her remembering every second, every word, every breath they shared when the world was quiet and he had no mask to wear. Cleo had never been the kind of woman who dug into people's lives. She kept to herself, taught art at the community center, and spent weekends painting landscapes she never showed to anyone. But now, her world had been jolted awake. She sat down at her laptop and typed in his supposed name, Miles Carpenter, Vermont. Nothing useful. A few public records. A high school yearbook photo that didn't match his face. A dead end, or maybe a lie that had just started to unravel. She drove into town later that day, her mind spiraling. As she pulled into the lot behind the public library, she wondered if she'd crossed a line, or if the line had already been crossed by someone else. In the local archives, she searched for weddings, property records, anything tied to Miles Carpenter. There were plenty of Carpenters in Vermont, but nothing that connected him clearly. Then, in a faded newspaper from 2 years ago, she saw something. A photo of a missing man from upstate New York. The resemblance was faint but undeniable. The name? Orson Blake. Her fingers trembled as she ran the article through the scanner. He had been reported missing after a supposed hiking accident. No body was found. No final trace. Just a note left in a lodge and an abandoned car. The man's fiancée had searched for months. His family had stopped hoping. And now, he was here, marrying her sister under a different name, pretending none of it ever happened. Cleo's pulse pounded. She wanted to march straight to Clare's house and drag her out of that perfect little life she was building. But something stopped her. If Orson was hiding from something, or someone, Clare could be in danger. And if Cleo exposed him too soon, she might lose her sister's trust forever. This wasn't just about heartbreak anymore. It was about truth and timing. And as she walked back to her car, a voice inside her whispered something she wasn't ready to believe. What if Orson had a reason for disappearing? Cleo sat in her car for nearly an hour, staring at the copy of the newspaper article spread across the passenger seat. The black and white image of Orson, then named Orson Blake, stared back at her, frozen in time. It wasn't just a resemblance anymore. It was him. Same eyes. Same scar above the eyebrow. Her stomach churned with questions that refused to quiet down. Why fake his death? Why build a new life with a new name, and with her sister, of all people? She dialed the number listed at the bottom of the article. It rang 6 times before a tired voice answered. Blake Residence, the woman said, cautious. Cleo hesitated. I'm sorry to bother you. I think I've seen your son. Orson. A pause. Then a trembling breath. That's not funny, the woman whispered. He's been gone for 2 years. Cleo's voice broke as she replied, He's alive. He's living here in Vermont, under a different name. And he's marrying my sister. For a long time, there was silence. Then the line went dead. Shaken, Cleo returned home and locked her door. She felt like she'd cracked open something that was never meant to be touched. That night, she couldn't sleep. Memories from the hospital flooded her mind. How Orson had looked at her when he first woke up. Lost. Vulnerable. Honest. Had he really forgotten who he was? Or had she been played from the beginning? Each possibility hurt in a different way. But one thing was clear. This man had walked away from an entire life and let the people who loved him suffer. Claire deserved to know that. But how could she say the words out loud? Your fiancé is a missing man who abandoned another woman. It would sound insane. Claire had always been the golden one, loved, admired, protected. Cleo, the quieter sister, the observer. Would she even believe her? Or think she was bitter, jealous, or worse, still hung up on a man she barely knew? The next morning, Cleo drove to Claire's house. She didn't call first. She needed to see her face, to hear her say his name. When Claire opened the door in her robe, glowing and smiling, Cleo's heart broke a little. Morning. I was just about to make tea, Claire said. Cleo stepped inside like a stranger, the newspaper clutched tightly in her hand. Her voice trembled as she said, We need to talk about Miles. Claire laughed gently, walking toward the kitchen. Oh, what has he done now? She teased. Cleo didn't smile. She stood still, frozen in place, holding the proof that the man her sister loved wasn't who he claimed to be. And she knew, one wrong word could shatter everything. Claire placed 2 mugs of tea on the table, completely unaware of the storm about to break. Cleo sat across from her, the folded newspaper gripped so tightly her knuckles turned white. For a moment, she considered softening her approach. Maybe ease into it. But the weight of it all refused to be gentle. Claire, she said, her voice low, steady, Miles isn't who you think he is. His real name is Orson Blake. He was reported missing 2 years ago in New York. She slid the article across the table. I found this yesterday. Claire's smile faded as she looked down. She scanned the headline, then the photo. Her fingers paused on the edge of the page. Slowly, her eyes lifted to meet Cleo's. Where did you get this? She asked, flatly. No shock, no outrage. Just a hollow kind of stillness that made Cleo's stomach twist. At the library. I called the number at the bottom. His mother answered, Cleo said. She thought I was joking. Claire, this is real. That man has another life. Another family. Claire leaned back, folding her arms. Her face changed, just slightly. Not anger, not fear, but something else. You shouldn't have called her, she said quietly. You don't know what you've done. Cleo blinked, stunned. Excuse me? Claire's gaze sharpened. You think I didn't know? That I just stumbled into this blindly? Her voice was rising now. I've known who he was since last year. Silence dropped between them like a weight. The air felt suddenly thin. Cleo's mouth went dry. You knew? Claire nodded slowly, her eyes hard. He told me everything. The accident. The disappearance. Why he left. She looked away. It wasn't what you think, Cleo. He wasn't running from someone. He was trying to protect someone. Cleo stood up, disbelief flooding her. You let me think I was crazy. You let him lie to my face. You knew and still let this happen. Claire stood too, angry now. Because it wasn't your business. You were never supposed to be involved. Cleo's voice shook. I saved him. I held his hand while he forgot his own name. And you knew? You let me feel like I was losing my mind. Claire looked at her with a kind of pity that cut deep. You were always looking for something to fix, Cleo. This time, it wasn't yours to fix. The room felt colder now. The kind of cold that doesn't come from air, but from words that can't be taken back. And just as Cleo turned to leave, she heard Clare whisper behind her, soft but sharp enough to pierce through her bones. He didn't choose you. He chose me. And he'd do it again. Cleo didn't sleep that night. Claire's words echoed in her head like a taunt. He didn't choose you. He chose me. But there was something else buried beneath that cruelty. Fear. Clare wasn't just defending Orson. She was protecting a secret. And Cleo knew, deep down, that her sister didn't fully trust the man she'd agreed to marry. Maybe she never had. That was the crack Cleo needed. If the truth couldn't come from them, she would dig it out herself. She returned to the library the next morning, her eyes bloodshot, her hands trembling with urgency. This time, she widened her search. Not just Vermont. Not just New York. She searched for every trace of Orson Blake, missing reports, legal documents, even public forums. Most led nowhere. But then she found a single post buried in a grief support group, dated 18 months ago, written by a woman named Danica Wren. The message read, I still can't forgive myself. If I hadn't told him the truth that night, maybe he wouldn't have disappeared. Maybe he'd still be here. Cleo clicked the profile. There was no photo, no details, just a city, Albany. Her pulse quickened. She tracked the user's email through an online registry and found a linked phone number. It was a long shot, but she dialed. The line rang once, then twice, before a woman answered. Hello. Her voice was cautious. Cleo hesitated, then said, My name is Cleo. I'm trying to find someone named Orson Blake. You posted about him last year. Silence. Then a sharp inhale. Who are you? The woman demanded. Cleo replied, I think I know where he is. But I need to understand what happened before he vanished. Danica didn't hang up. Her voice dropped to a whisper. You need to listen carefully. I haven't said his name in over a year. But if he's back, if he's resurfaced, then someone's going to get hurt. Maybe already has. Cleo's breath caught. What are you talking about? Danica's voice cracked. Orson found out something he wasn't supposed to know. About his father. About a business deal gone bad. It wasn't just a disappearance. It was an escape. And people were watching him. The line went dead. Cleo sat frozen, phone in her lap, the hum of the dial tone ringing in her ears. None of this was about love, or heartbreak, or even betrayal. Orson hadn't just abandoned a life. He'd fled it, along with the people in it. And now he had tangled Clare in whatever darkness he'd tried to leave behind. And Cleo knew she wasn't just uncovering a lie. She was standing in the middle of a storm that hadn't finished brewing. Cleo drove home in silence, her fingers gripping the wheel until her knuckles turned white. Danica's words kept looping in her head. If he's resurfaced, someone's going to get hurt. It wasn't just a warning, it was a clock ticking. The more she pulled at the threads of Orson's past, mais claro ficava que ele estava fugindo de algo que podia matar. And now, Clare, sweet, stubborn Clare, was wrapped around him like a shield, blind to the storm building around her. She didn't go home. Instead, Cleo parked outside Orson and Clare's townhouse and waited. The sun dipped low, casting orange streaks across the windshield. When the porch light flicked on, and she saw Orson step outside to take a call, She opened her door and got out. He didn't notice her at first. He was pacing, voice low, but urgent. I told you not to contact me again. No, you listen, I'm not going back. That life is over. Then he turned and froze when he saw her. Their eyes locked. No pretense now. No fake smiles. Just a wall of truth between them, cold and immovable. So it's true, Cleo said. You ran. You lied. And now you're dragging her into something she doesn't understand. Orson's face tightened. You don't know what you're talking about. She took a step closer. Then help me understand. Because right now, all I see is a man hiding behind my sister, pretending to love her while looking over his shoulder. He exhaled, the fight leaving him for a moment. You think I don't hate this? He said, voice low. Every day, I wake up wondering if someone's watching. If my past is finally going to catch up. I never meant to involve Claire. I didn't even know who she was when we met. It just happened. Cleo shook her head. You should have walked away. He looked at her then, really looked, like maybe he had 100 things to say and not enough air to say them. I tried, he whispered. You were supposed to be the goodbye. A door creaked open behind them. Claire stood on the porch, barefoot, eyes wide. What's going on? She asked, voice trembling. Orson turned slowly. Claire, he said, but she held up her hand. Save it. I heard everything. She stared at him like she didn't recognize the man in front of her. Cleo's heart pounded as silence settled in the air like a storm about to crack. And then Claire said something Cleo didn't expect. If there's someone after you, Orson, we all need to leave. Tonight. They packed in silence. Claire threw clothes into a duffel while Orson rifled through drawers for documents and cash. Cleo stood near the doorway, still stunned by her sister's reaction. Leave. She thought Claire would scream, maybe throw the ring at his face, not choose to run with him. But there she was, calm and focused, like a woman who'd already made peace with the impossible. How long have you known? Cleo finally asked. Claire didn't look up. Not long. A few weeks. I found a box under the bed, old letters, IDs with different names. When I confronted him, he told me the truth. At least, most of it. Cleo crossed her arms. And you stayed? Claire zipped the bag with force. Because I love him. And because I know what it's like to be hunted by your past. You of all people should understand that. The words hit Cleo like a slap. She didn't respond. Orson stepped between them. This isn't her fight, Cleo. You don't have to come. But Cleo met his eyes, unwavering. Yes, I do. Because whether you like it or not, I'm already in it. And I'm not letting her walk into something she doesn't fully understand. By midnight, the three of them were in Claire's car, driving with the headlights off through back roads that cut through the forest. Orson had picked the route. He claimed there were places he knew, safe houses from when things first went bad. Are you sure they won't follow us? Claire asked quietly. He hesitated. I'm not sure of anything anymore. Cleo watched him through the rearview mirror. He looked tired. Older. Like the past 2 years had stolen a part of him he'd never get back. They stopped to refuel at a remote gas station just over the state line. While Orson pumped gas, Cleo pulled Claire aside near the vending machines. Are you really ready for this? She whispered. Claire looked at her, eyes fierce. You think I'm weak. You always did. But I'm not. I've made my choice. Cleo swallowed the lump in her throat. He's still lying about something. I can feel it. Claire turned away. Maybe. But he's still the only person who ever looked at me like I wasn't fragile. That counts for something. Before Cleo could respond, she saw a black SUV pull into the lot. Its windows were tinted, and it didn't stop near the pumps. It just sat there, watching, waiting. She grabbed Claire's arm and yanked her back toward the car. "We need to go. Now." And just as the engine roared to life, the SUV's driver's side door creaked open, and a man in a gray suit stepped out, holding something behind his back. Cleo's breath caught as the man in the gray suit stepped fully into the light. He was older, mid-50s, with cold, calculating eyes that didn't blink as they locked onto Orson. The object behind his back glinted briefly. A gun. Orson froze. Claire gasped. And for the first time since that rainy night on the road, Cleo felt real fear crawl under her skin. This wasn't a nightmare anymore. This was real. And it was about to turn violent. Orson raised his hands slowly, stepping forward. "I told you," he said quietly. "I'm out. I've been out for years." The man chuckled without humor. "You don't get to walk away, Orson. You disappeared, cost people a lot of money, and trust. You think changing your name changes the deal?" Claire stepped between them, voice shaking. "He's not who he was. Whatever he did, he paid for it every day since." The man turned his eyes to her, sharp, almost amused. "And now you're dragging innocent people into it. Brave. Or stupid. Maybe both." Cleo could barely hear her own thoughts over the pounding in her chest. She looked around. The gas station was deserted. No witnesses. No help coming. She moved slowly behind Orson, eyes on the man's hand. "You don't have to do this," she said. "We leave. You never see us again." But he only smiled. "It's not about seeing. It's about remembering." Then he raised the gun. Claire screamed. And Orson moved. It happened in seconds. Orson lunged, pushing Claire aside. The shot rang out, sharp, deafening, and Cleo dropped to the ground. When she looked up, Orson was on the pavement, blood spreading across his shirt. The man in the suit turned to run, but Cleo grabbed a metal pole from beside the pump and swung hard. It cracked against his arm, sending the gun flying. He stumbled back, stunned. Claire rushed to Orson, pressing her hands over the wound. Stay with me, she cried. Sirens wailed in the distance. Someone must have called. The man staggered into the woods behind the station and disappeared into the darkness. Cleo dropped the pole, panting, her hands trembling. She knelt beside Orson, whose face had gone pale. "I didn't want this," he whispered. "I just wanted peace," Claire sobbed, holding his head in her lap. "Then you should have told me everything," she said, her voice breaking. "All of it." And as red and blue lights danced across the trees, Cleo looked down at her sister and the man she loved, and realized this was the moment everything had been building toward. But none of them knew yet if it would end in forgiveness or loss. 3 days passed like smoke. Hospitals had a way of making time feel different. Slower, quieter, like the world outside had stopped to hold its breath. Orson was alive. The bullet missed his heart by less than an inch. Claire hadn't left his side since the ambulance. Cleo had only come back once, bringing fresh clothes and a sketchpad she never used. The room smelled of antiseptic and wilted flowers. Outside, the leaves were turning, but inside, everything felt stuck between seasons. Orson lay with tubes in his arm and bruises on his ribs, eyes half open as Cleo walked in. Claire looked up, tired but calm. "He wants to talk to you," she said softly. Cleo nodded and sat beside the bed, avoiding his gaze for a moment. Then, finally, she looked at him, really looked. There was no mask now. No lies. Just the face of a man who had run too far, for too long. "You could have told me everything back then," she said. "Back when you couldn't even remember your own name." "I didn't want to pull you into my mess," Orson replied. His voice was hoarse, fragile. "I thought I was protecting you. Both of you." Cleo shook her head slowly. "That's not protection. That's control. People can't love you if they don't know who you are." He turned his face toward the window, the light casting soft shadows over the bruises. "I never stopped thinking about you, Cleo. Not once." She closed her eyes. "It's not about who you thought of. It's about who you chose. And it wasn't me." There was no bitterness in her voice. Just clarity. The kind that comes after surviving something you didn't ask for. She stood up, walked to Clare, and took her hand. "He needs help. Real help. Therapy, time. Not just a new name and a second chance handed to him for free." Clare nodded slowly, holding back tears. "I know. But I still believe he's worth saving." Cleo smiled, small and sad. "Maybe he is. But this time, you'll save him with the truth. Not with silence." Outside the hospital, Cleo stepped into the cool October air. For the first time in weeks, her chest didn't feel so tight. She didn't have all the answers, but she had herself back. That mattered. She reached into her bag, pulled out the sketchpad, and finally flipped it open. A blank page. A beginning, not an ending. Because some stories don't need closure. They need courage to keep going.